Ever been at a party? You know, like when everyone's dressed up, looking all successful and happy, but you just can't help but wonder what's really going on behind those smiles.
Yeah.
What secrets are they hiding? Well, that's what Stephanie Regalado explores in her book, If They Only Knew.
Right.
And we're diving deep into it today. It's a collection of 60 anonymous true stories from women.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it's a real eye-opener.
It is. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
Regalado didn't actually set out to write a book.
Oh, really?
It all started with a simple column in a magazine.
Yeah.
She invited women to share their, if they only knew, stories
Right.
anonymously.
Right.
And the response, it was overwhelming.
Wow.
It quickly became clear that she'd tapped into something powerful.
Yeah.
A deep need for women to have a safe space, to be truly vulnerable and honest without fear of judgment.
I can imagine. And it's so fascinating how that one idea snowballed into a full-blown book. And what's even more interesting is that the seed for this whole project was planted at an award ceremony where Regalado herself was receiving an award for her charity work.
Okay.
And she was actually going through a miscarriage at the time, but putting on a brave face for the crowd.
Oh, gosh. That experience must have been so isolating for her. To be surrounded by people, celebrating her success,
Right.
while silently grieving such a personal loss.
Right.
It's no wonder that it sparked this idea in her.
The realization that everyone, even those who seem to have it all together,
Right.
are carrying hidden burdens.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's unpack this whole concept of anonymity, because it seems to be at the heart of what makes this book so compelling.
Okay.
Why is it that being anonymous empowers people, especially women, to share these deeply personal things? I mean, wouldn't it be more therapeutic to share openly?
Well, it's not always about therapy. Sometimes it's just about safety. Think about it. When you're anonymous, you remove the risk of social repercussions.
Right.
You can be brutally honest without worrying about how people will perceive you,
Yeah.
how it might affect your relationships, your job, even your reputation.
Take a confession booth, an online forum, or even something as simple as a masked ball.
Okay.
Anonymity creates a sense of freedom,
Freedom.
allowing people to express themselves in ways they might not otherwise.
Right. It's like that feeling of liberation you get when you're traveling in a foreign country where no one knows you.
Yeah.
You can be whoever you want to be for a while.
Right.
And for women, there's often this added pressure to present a perfect image.
Right.
To
Absolutely.
be strong, have it all figured out. Anonymity allows them to shed those expectations and just be real.
Precisely. It's less about maintaining a facade and more about authentic connection.
Right.
And that's what makes this book so powerful. The stories that emerge from that safe space.
Yeah.
They're incredibly raw and diverse.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about everyday struggles with relationships or work-life balance.
Yeah.
Some of these stories delve into truly harrowing experiences. You're right. There's one story in particular that really stayed with me.
Okay.
It's about a young woman who was sexually assaulted at a party, and the assault was actually videotaped.
Oh, wow.
Can you talk a bit more about that case and Regalado's involvement?
Yeah, that story is particularly heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Not only did this young woman experience a horrific trauma,
Right.
but the video of her assault continued to circulate, further victimizing her.
Oh, my gosh.
What's remarkable is that when Regalado received this story, she didn't just publish it.
Well,
She reached out to the woman and offered to help her seek justice.
wow.
It becomes a real ethical dilemma. How do you help someone pursue legal action while also respecting their desire for anonymity?
Wow. That raises so many questions. What was the outcome of that situation? Did Regalado manage to help her?
Unfortunately, the book doesn't delve into the specifics of the legal proceeding,
Okay.
but the fact that Regalado was willing to step in and offer her support speaks volumes about her commitment to these women.
Yeah.
And the power of sharing these stories, even if it doesn't always lead to legal action, the act of sharing can be a first step towards healing, towards reclaiming your voice. It's interesting how this case highlights the ethical tightrope that Regalado had to walk throughout this whole project.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have these incredibly powerful stories that deserve to be heard.
Right.
And on the other, you have the responsibility to protect the anonymity of these women who have entrusted you with their most vulnerable truths.
It's like she's holding these fragile stories in her hands, trying to find a way to share them with the world without shattering them.
Yeah.
And it's not just about legal repercussions, right?
Yeah.
There's also the emotional toll. that sharing these stories can take, even anonymously.
Absolutely. Imagine reliving some of your most painful experiences, even if it's just through writing.
Oh, yeah.
It takes incredible strength and courage to even put those words on paper.
It really does. It makes me wonder how Regalado even went about finding a publisher for this book. I mean, wouldn't traditional publishers be hesitant to take on a project with so many potential legal and ethical landmines?
You're absolutely right. Traditional publishers were initially very wary of the whole concept. They were worried about legal challenges, the potential for controversy,
Right.
not to mention the fact that anonymous stories don't exactly lend themselves to marketing and publicity.
So how did she manage to get it published? Did she have to make any compromises?
No,
Did she have to reveal any of the identities to appease the publishers?
Actually, she refused to compromise on the anonymity of her contributors.
Oh,
She felt that was non-negotiable.
good for her.
Instead of bowing to pressure from traditional publishing houses, she decided to take a leap of faith and self-publish.
Oh, wow.
Through her own company, she says media.
Wow, that's a bold move.
Yeah.
It must have been a lot of work to take on the entire publishing process herself.
It was.
But I guess it also gave her complete control over the project.
Exactly. And it allowed her to stay true to her vision for the book.
Yep.
It's a real testament to her determination to create a platform for these women's voices. And it paid off big time. If They Only Knew became a huge success.
Right.
Resonating with readers all over the country.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that come from the margins, the voices that are often silenced or overlooked. But despite this wide range of experiences, were there any common themes that emerged from these stories?
Absolutely. Despite the diversity of backgrounds and experiences, several common threads run through these narratives.
Okay.
One of the most prominent themes is the feeling of isolation, of being an outsider.
Oh, really?
You see it in the stories of broken relationships, professional setbacks, and even the profound shame that prevents women from opening up and seeking help.
Wow.
It's like modern society, despite being hyper-connected online, is actually breeding a deep sense of loneliness, especially for women.
That's a really interesting observation. It's like we're all so busy curating our perfect online personas that we've forgotten how to connect with each other on a deeper level.
Right. And when you're struggling with something personal, that sense of isolation can be incredibly debilitating.
Yeah.
It's like you're carrying this weight all alone
Right.
because you're afraid to share it with anyone.
It's like everyone's walking around
Yeah.
with their own if they only knew story,
Exactly.
but no one feels safe enough to actually share it.
And that's where Regalado's book comes in.
Right.
It creates a space for those stories to be heard, even if it's just anonymously.
Yeah.
And in doing so, it helps to break down that sense of isolation
Right.
and foster a sense of shared understanding. It shows us that we're not alone in our struggles.
It's like that saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. Even if you're not actively seeking advice or solutions, just knowing that other people have experienced similar challenges can be incredibly comforting.
Absolutely.
And sometimes just the act of putting those feelings into words can be therapeutic in itself.
Right.
It allows you to process those emotions, to make sense of them, and to start to move forward.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I found particularly fascinating about the book is that it wasn't just about pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Yes, there are a lot of heavy stories,
Right.
but there's also this incredible sense of resilience woven throughout these narratives. Did you pick up on that too?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. It wasn't just survival, though. It felt like these women were actively pushing back against their circumstances,
Yeah.
finding ways to not only cope, but to grow and even thrive.
You said it. It's like they were taking these lemons life threw at them and making the most incredible batches of lemonade.
Right.
You see it in their determination to overcome challenges, to rebuild their lives, and to find moments of joy, even amidst the darkness.
It really makes you question your own assumptions about strength, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not always about outward appearances or grand gestures.
Right.
Sometimes it's about those quiet, everyday acts of resilience. The refusal to give up,
Yeah.
even when things feel impossible.
Exactly. It's about finding the strength to get out of bed each morning,
Yeah.
to face another day, to keep moving forward, even when you feel like you're dragging a 1,000-pound weight behind you.
You know, one thing that struck me was how these stories, even the most heart-wrenching ones, never felt exploitative. Regalado managed to find this balance between honesty and sensitivity.
Yeah.
It never felt like she was sensationalizing these women's experiences for shock value.
You're so right. It would have been easy to fall into that trap, to
Right.
focus on the most dramatic or shocking elements of these stories.
Yeah.
But Regalado seems to approach each narrative with a deep sense of respect and empathy. She allows the women's voices to shine through, unfiltered and authentic.
I think that's what makes the book so powerful.
Yeah.
Feels like you're sitting down with a group of friends,
Yeah.
sharing intimate stories over a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
There's this sense of trust and intimacy that permeates the entire book.
It creates this incredible ripple effect. Yeah.
It's not just about the individual women who are sharing their stories.
Right.
It's about the readers who are touched by those stories,
Mm-hmm.
who feel seen and heard and understood.
Right.
It starts a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of community and shared experience.
And I think that's ultimately what Regalado hoped to achieve with this book.
Yeah.
To create a space where women feel empowered to share their stories, to connect with one another, and to know that they are not alone.
It's about breaking down the stigma that surrounds so many of these issues,
Yeah.
whether it's mental health struggles, relationship problems, or traumatic experiences.
Right.
It's about showing that vulnerability is not a weakness,
Hmm.
but a source of strength.
What would you say to someone who's listening to this deep dive and feeling inspired to explore their own if they only knew story?
Ooh, that's a good question.
What advice would you give them?
I would say start by finding a safe space.
Okay.
It could be a trusted friend, a therapist, a support group.
Or even just a journal where you can pour out your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Remember, you don't have to share your story with the world.
Right.
You don't even have to share it with anyone else if you don't feel comfortable.
Right.
The important thing is to create a space for yourself to process those emotions and to honor your own experiences.
I love that advice.
Yeah.
It's not about forcing yourself to be vulnerable before you're ready.
Right.
It's about finding the right outlet for your story, whether it's a private journal or a public platform.
And remember, vulnerability is not a destination.
Hmm.
It's a journey.
Oh, no.
It's about taking small steps, being gentle with yourself,
Yeah.
and trusting the process.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into If They Only Knew,
Mm-hmm.
what's the one message you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
I hope they'll remember that everyone has a story.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is carrying something beneath the surface.
Right.
And by approaching each other with curiosity, empathy, and a willingness to listen, we can create a world where those stories can be shared.
Where vulnerability is celebrated and where connection becomes the rule rather than the exception.
Beautifully said. It's a powerful reminder that we're all in this together, each with our own unique experiences, but ultimately connected by our shared humanity. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Stephanie Regalado's If They Only Knew.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope it sparked some insightful reflections and perhaps even inspired you to explore your own If They Only Knew story.